distance vector routing protocol. We have learned about link state routing protocol. In the link state routing protocol, we have studied Dijkstra shortest path algorithm. In the distance vector routing protocol, we have learned about Bellman-Ford algorithm. There are variations also available in Bellman-Ford algorithm. We have got distributed Bellman-Ford algorithm, reverse distributed Bellman-Ford algorithm. So interested candidates, please have a look at that as well. And again, it's my appeal to look at the teaching plan while you are getting prepared for your examination as well. I know at least two or three of you could not answer one of the questions because you did not look at the teaching plan. You are looking at only the content which I have given to you. So it's my appeal that you look at the teaching plan as well, which textbook or reference books are given to you for learning. Please stick with that. All right, let's get into the hierarchical routing. Before that, I wish to give you a small assignment that you will be learning about link cost changes and link failure. Okay, in the distance sector routing protocol, the link failure is an important issue, and how the DVR algorithms or distance sector algorithms are handling this issue. Second one, Poisson rivers. For instance, if a particular router has failed and the neighbor router has given an advertisement to the other router that that link has failed, that should not be given by the same router once again in the reverse order. Then you will never be able to meet something called convergence. So there is something called Poisson reverse, very interesting phenomena in the distance sector routing protocol, especially in RIP protocols. All right, so please read about that, learn about that, and also compare and contrast the distance vector and link state routing protocols as well. All right, so these three we are going to learn, and you are going to write with your own language. All right, so probably maximum of 3 pages or 4 pages, and I will create the um, assignment in the Google Classroom. This will be part of your qualitative assessment. I would like to give the deadline as next Friday. So you have got ample time, more than a week, hardly 3 pages. I hope this will not disturb you much. Please read it and write by your own language, and you are going to submit it. It's going to be handwritten. It's not going to be soft copy. Take a snap, convert it into PDF, and then you are going to upload it in the GCR assignment page. Moving on, we are going to talk about the hierarchical routing, right? So now I should convince you, why should we have hierarchical routing? What is that, sir? What is that hierarchical routing? There are two things. There are two reasons why we should go for hierarchical routing, and we can also learn about that more as we progress in the further slides. Okay, the two major reasons or concerns which are to be addressed by hierarchical routing are scalability and administrative autonomy. You know what is scalability, you know what is administrative autonomy, but just wanted to convince you that we require something called hierarchical routing. So I have two slides for that. Okay, one is about this scalability. So if you look at this particular topology, I have copied this from the internet, though I have worked something similar to that long back. Recently I haven't worked with such sort topology, but it's going to be very interesting topology, having more than 15 to 18 routers. All right, and if you look at the number of networks, it is surely going to cross at least 40, at least. Okay, so this is going to be a very simple topology, which are no which normally the network administrator would come across in their regular every day. But what about the scalability? Let me give you a small demo example. You can see on the screen there is a router with name Tellas 3. Let me use the laser pointer. Yeah, you can see there is a router with the name Tellas 3. Let's assume, all right, let's assume that this particular router fails. All right, so what is going to happen, and at the same time this router is using this link to reach the destination. For example, the GAT3 router is talking to Kerberos 3 through Tellas 3 router. So this is the path. All right, suddenly this router fails. So how the communication is going to go from this to this? Now you can see this is going to take this path. All right, so this is one of the paths it's going to take, and there could be multiple paths existing. All right, so suddenly this has to be done in no time, otherwise your packets are going to be lost. All right, and by the meantime this router comes back, okay, comes into action, Now this is going to be the shortest path. Maybe it could be the best path also, right? Preferred path also. Now the route immediately has to be changed back to this. Now this is okay. This, if this is a within a small autonomous system, it's fine. What about our internet? Right? Because our internet is going to be a semi-structured network where the separate different administrative uh, uh, teams, okay, maybe Karunya, maybe Airtel and other institution, other schools, they all have their own separate networks. Within that they have their own topologies. All right, so when you have such things are available, and if you try to have a same net routing protocol across the internet, then it's not going to converge at all right. Now this is one of the reasons why should we have the hierarchical routing. All right, I'll tell you what is hierarchical routing shortly. All right, so scalability is one of the parameters, reasons behind this requirement of hierarchical routing. The second one is the administrative autonomy. All right, I have placed the photograph of one person. He is no more, and many of you might be aware of him. He is the former Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu, Mr. Kamarajar. All right, though I am not very much interested in politics and the all this administration of states and country, but one of the incidents people used to talk about his life. All right, just wanted to map that with the administrative autonomy. Okay, it was told in one of the books. I do not know whether it really happened. He was going in a car, being the chief minister. He was going in a car with his own personal assistant PA and the driver. He's going in a car, and of course there is a security vehicle going in front of him, and they were stopped at a railway gate because the train was about to cross that level crossing, and there was a person who is managing the level crossing who closed the door. He put the door. Okay, the gate is closed. Now he is not able to move. He has to go a little faster because he was in a very urgent travel. So one of the persons, maybe his personal assistant, got down from his vehicle car, went to this person who is the gatekeeper of that particular railway gate, and told him that the chief minister of Tamil Nadu is waiting in the car. Why don't you open the gate so that we can go, because we are in a great urgency. All right. So when this happened, and the gatekeeper said, sorry sir, the train is about to come near, and it is not safe if you open the gate. And the person came and said to Mr. Kamarajar that the gatekeeper has refused to open the gate. He did not express anything, he just kept quiet. The train has come, it has crossed, the gates are opened, car has started moving. He called the gatekeeper near to him, and he appreciated his statements, right? Because you are the having the full autonomy. All right, you have the autonomy city to manage this gate. You are the boss, you are the head of this, this particular railway gate. You have all the rights and authority over this gate. I do not want to interfere, wanted to appreciate you. All right, do not want to disturb you. This is what he has said at that time, all right, to that gatekeeper. I'm not going to derive anything else out of it, but administrative autonomy is very, very important. What will happen if a chief minister comes and interferes with his work? All right, that is not right. Okay, when you are doing a particular job, you may be the manager, or you may be taking up a specific job role, and you may not like somebody else intruding into this or encroaching into your authority and asking you the question and disturbing you. All right, that's not going to help. Driver has to drive the vehicle. All right, conductor has to collect the bill. This is how the system is, so we have to do. Driver should not say, no, no, I will collect the bill, or conductor should not say, hey, get lost, I'm going to drive the car, the bus. That's not going to happen, right? Administrative autonomy is very, 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 very important. So if you don't have the hierarchical routing, when the whole of the internet is following a same network structure or same routing protocols, you will not be able to achieve administrative autonomy. So let's come back to our networking terminology. What is an administrative autonomy? It is given, ideally an organization should be able to run and administer its network as it wishes, while still being able to connect its network to other outside network. All right? I just read this statement from the screen. I haven't memorized this, but the second half is very, very important. Sir, you are having your own administrative authority, that's fine. That does not mean that you have to operate alone. You are supposed to collaborate with your neighbors, or you are supposed to collaborate with other people. So administrative autonomy not only gives you all the rights, but also to work with others. All right. Now this is very very crucial point why we should go for hierarchical routing. What is that happening in the hierarchical routing, sir? Very simple. Every autonomous system is permitted to run their own routing protocol, their own policy. It could be access control, it could be um, firewall or packet filtering, it could be anything. They can run their own policy within their autonomous system, within their administrative control. All right. Similarly, another person can do the same thing. He can have his own administrative control over that, but still these two networks should be able to interconnect each other. This is what happening in the case of hierarchical routing. So what happens, if you talk about two different administrative teams, let me say autonomous system 1, the other one is autonomous system 2. Autonomous system 1 can run RIP protocol, autonomous system 2 can run OSPF protocol. Now how are we going to interoperate? That's where our hierarchical routing comes, because RIP advertisements cannot be interpreted by OSPF. Similarly, OSPF advertisements cannot be understood by RIP. All right, so there should be somebody who is able to connect these two. So this is what we talk about hierarchical routing. All right. Now, when we talk about the hierarchical routing, we have to come across a word called autonomous system. All right. If you search in the Google what is an autonomous system, you will get a statement, but it is not well defined. But in general, okay, don't worry too much about what is that autonomous system. It's a new word. No, a system which is maintained by one administrative department. For instance, the whole of network within Karunya can be taken as autonomous system, or whatever the network I have got from BSNL, okay, in my native place. So all these the machines which are connected to the BSNL ISP could be part of autonomous system, which are connected to Airtel could be Airtel autonomous system, or all the machines on the network which are managed by a particular institution could be an autonomous system. Okay, within an autonomous system there is a synchronization. All right, they all have the same language, same protocol, same policies implemented. Okay, between autonomous system policies might be different, but there should be a interoperability required. All right, this is what autonomous system. So the protocol which are running within the autonomous system perfectly is called as intra-autonomous system. You don't require any demonstration of that. But I wanted to explain that here. You have got three autonomous systems on the screen. They are named as autonomous system 1, autonomous system 3, and 2. Okay, autonomous system 1, 2, and 3. There are three autonomous systems, right? Now, autonomous system 1 has got four routers. They are named as 1C, I'm sorry, 1A, 1B, 1C, and 1D. And they all are interconnected the way it is shown. Similarly, the autonomous system 2 has got three routers within its network. They are 2A, 2B, and 2C. And their interconnection also are shown in this topology. Similarly, autonomous system 3. And you also can see some lines which are not very solid, which are terminated abruptly. Okay, you could see 1C is connected to two more lines, 1A is connected to two more lines, and so on. These all are depicting local area networks. Okay, they are all local area networks. Now, the routing protocols which are within a autonomous system, they are called as intra-autonomous system. For instance, you may have RIP version 1. So RIP version 1 might be employed in within autonomous system 1, having connecting 1A, 1B, 1C, and 1D routers. All right, and it also provides interconnectivity among the other LANs. Okay, one C is connected to two LANs, one A is connected to two LANs, and so on. So the connectivity among the devices in these networks is taken care by intra-autonomous system. Then what is that inter-autonomous system? As the word clearly says, the connectivity between the autonomous systems. All right. For instance, you have got 1B router is connected to 2A. Now it is the responsibility of the router 1B to connect the machines in autonomous system 2 with the machines in autonomous system 1. All right, so this, and there should be a protocol involved. Generally we go for border gateway protocol here, BGP. That also we'll be exploring at the end of this particular topic, right? So within the between the autonomous system we should have a routing protocol. This is the inter-autonomous system, okay, among the autonomous systems. All right. And also, these routers are called as gateway routers. Let me take the example of autonomous system 2. Okay, this autonomous system 2 has got a router called 2A, which is a gateway router. Okay, we know what is the default gateway. Default gateway has got the responsibility of taking your packets which are belonging to a remote network, right? So that's what your default gateway. Similarly, you have got a gateway router here, which is called 2A. Okay, so uh, the routers 2C and 2B in this topology, they are not gateway routers. They are within intra-autonomous system routers. Now 2C will have the knowledge that if it has a packet to some other network, some other autonomous system, it's going to forward it to the gateway routers. Okay. Now, so gateway router is the way of escaping from your autonomous system. Now, autonomous system 2 and autonomous system 3, they both have only one gateway router. Look at this. Autonomous system 3 has got only one gateway router. Autonomous system 2 has got only one gateway router. What's the case of autonomous system 1? If you look at it, has got two gateway routers, okay, 1C and 1B. Now there is a dilemma. What should I do? Suppose the router 1D has got a packet to be forwarded to autonomous system 2. Okay, now it has got two gateway routers. Now, which one is to be chosen by the router 1D? We use a mechanism called hot potato routing. Okay, this hot potato routing is very interesting phenomena, but it's a very simple one. These routers will always go for the least hop count. So in that case, if autonomous system 1, I'm sorry, if 1D, the router 1D has received a packet to be forwarded to 2B, it always forwards through 1B because this has the shortest hop count, shortest distance to the other autonomous system. Uh, all right, we let us assume that 1C is also connected to autonomous system 2. Okay, we are going to have the assumption. So 1C is a gateway router. It is also having connected to the autonomous system 2. Now 1D will choose only this path, not this path, because it violates your hot potato routing policy. So it's a very simple one. Hot potato routing. You always go for the least cost path, of course, but and least distance path. That is what happening in the case of autonomous in the hot potato routing. All right. So when you have this border routers, okay, sometimes it is called as border routers, but it is normally generally the gateway routers. So these gateway routers are having the forwarding table, which has the knowledge received from two different algorithms. One is intra-autonomous system algorithm. The other one is inter-autonomous system algorithms. Okay. So that is available with all the border router. That information is exchanged across all the routers within your autonomous system, because unless you share this routing information, your the routers within your autonomous system will have no way to know the route to the networks in the other autonomous systems. All right, so this information, this knowledge is received from the intra algorithm as well as inter algorithm for routing these packets. So this is what exactly happening in your autonomous system. Okay, and this is where exactly happening in hierarchical routing. What is that hierarchical routing? Within your autonomous system you have got intra algorithm, between the autonomous system you have got inter algorithm. So there is a different hierarchy. All these inter algorithms are getting the knowledge from the intra autonomous system algorithms as well. For instance, BGP protocol may get information from a RIP or OSPF protocol. So this is what your hierarchical routing. All right. So moving on, what exactly happens in the routing in the internet? This is going to be a very simple topic. We are going to look into little more detail of RIP version 1 as well as OSPF. Okay. So your textbook or your syllabus is not having the full details about the RIP and OSPF, but I would encourage you guys to please read about any white paper from Cisco's page or any other standard a networking learning platform to know more about RIP protocol and OSPF protocols. Very, very interesting things, but not all details are given in our textbook and also in our curriculum here, because get only the skeleton of what is what. I urge you to build your knowledge on that. Okay, so intra autonomous system routing, well, let's talk about RIP. Okay, so there are two things within when you talk about intra autonomous system routing. One is routing information protocol RIP, the other one is open shortest path first, OSPF. Okay, let's talk about RIP first and then OSPF. But I have taken one or two graphics from the internet. It was not created by me. You can look at this on the left hand side. You can see a blue color, probably the greenish color and yellow color routers. All right. So they also talk something among them. So if you do some eavesdropping into that, what are they exactly talking? It says, hey, I have a following network 10.0.0.0.8 and 192.168.1.256/30. So it is giving an information to its neighboring router about the knowledge it has. Similarly, he has got knowledge about two networks. He is telling to its neighbors, and he also is giving his knowledge to its neighbor. This is what exactly happening in your routing information protocol called RIP. What about the case of open shortest path first? OSPF, being a link state routing protocol, is supposed to have the entire knowledge about the network, not only about your neighbors, but the whole topology. Okay, that is little complicated. I don't intend to explain about this, your link state updates and link state acknowledgement, link state packet updates, all these things. Okay, um, but just put a small graphics that this is little bit complicated than your RIP protocol when it is exchanging the information. On the other hand, OSPF is a little faster in convergence than your routing information protocol. One of the major reasons for that advantage is, link state routing protocols, they always go for the triggered updates. When there is a change in the link state, it immediately triggers the update across the whole network, whereas distance sector routing protocol, especially the RIP protocol, does not do that. All right. So moving on, there are some points for us to remember about RIP protocol. Okay, of this I have uh, uh, summarized from your textbook, but important fields, important points for you to remember. Okay, routing information protocol, in short, RIP. It uses hop count as the cost metric. Okay, it uses only the hop count as the cost metric. That is, each link has the cost of one. I remember one of, I think, Jomin Joseph, if I'm right, he raised a question about this in one of the classes after the class was over. Hope this slide and the further slide will help him to still clarify his doubts if he has got anything. All right. So RIP uses hop count as the cost metric, and it also uses the every link is given a equal cost, that is one. So when a router crosses, I'm sorry, when a packet crosses the router, hop count becomes one. Another router hop, it is crossed two hops and so on. All right. It uses the term called hop. All right. And the third one about the RIP protocol applicable to version 1 and version 2 is that the maximum cost of a path is limited to 15. It signifies something very strange one. What does happen when you have the maximum cost of a path? Okay, so far we have spoken about only the link. Okay, here I have used the word link, but here I have used the word path. What is the path? Path is the series of links we have learned about in the graph theory at least 2 3 weeks back. All right, so path is sequence of or collection of links, or in other words, link is actually a pair of routers. Right? So series of routers is called as a path. So what is the meaning of maximum cost of a path? That in RIP protocol, when a packet travels, the maximum hop it can take is only 15, which means RIP protocols will not LAN routes which are beyond 16 hops from its premises. Okay, so any network which has the reachability of more than 15 will be termed as unreachable by RIP protocol. You have to remember this about the RIP protocol. All right. Okay, the fourth one, RIP always goes for the hello timer. Okay, it always shake hands with its neighbor just to say hi, how are you, are you alive, how the things are, similar to that. So routing updates are exchanged between the neighbors every 30 seconds. Of course, you can configure that. You can change the timer as well when you are configuring a RIP if it is required. By default, it takes 30 seconds. So every 30 second, it sends its routing updates from its with its neighbors. Okay, neighbors means the connected routers. So it sends the routing updates to the connected routers every 30 seconds. We call it as root RIP advertisements. All right. Each router maintains a routing table. Okay. It is also called as RIP table. That's okay. We have already explored what is the routing table of RIP of a router. All right. And the other two points is probably the sixth and the seventh point. If a router does not hear from its neighbor at least once every 180 seconds, the neighbor is considered to be no longer reachable. Let me explain to you what it is. I have said in one of the points that every router in the RIP exchanges hello packets, or in other words, advertisement. RIP advertisement happens every 30 seconds with its neighbor. Okay. Now what happens? You have sent a message hello, you haven't received. Okay, fine. After 30 seconds, you are sending another message. Still there is no reply from the other person. You still wait. The third message is sent. It still waits. There is no response from the other person. So how long can you wait? You can wait only for 160 seconds, 180 seconds. In other words, six times the hello messages. Okay. After the 180 seconds has expired, if you still don't hear from your neighbor, you will treat him as dead person, right? Which means the router is no longer available. You will update your routing table. Whatever routes you have learned from that router will be flushed out of your routing table, and you will go for finding out the fresh route. Okay, this is what happening when you have the hold on timer of 180 seconds. And routers are using this RIP protocol. By routers are sending this advertisement using UDP port number 520. It's a well-known port. 520 is a well-known port because it's less than 1023. Now you should have a question, sir. What happens? Uh, Routers are using transport layer, UDP, port number. Are they running in application layer? Yes, you guessed it right. And I would again encourage you to please just Google about Unix implementation of RIP. Will give you what exactly happens. Although the routing updates are happening in the networking layer, it is triggered by the application layer through the UDP protocols. Okay, why UDP? Even if some packets are missing, no problem. You are going to get it updated shortly in the next update. All right, so that's about RIP protocol. Let's talk something about the OSPF, Open Shortest Path first. Okay, we know it uses Dijkstra shortest path algorithm. That's okay. We have learnt about this earlier. But what is the primary difference between these two? Yes, OSPF is sending the flooding of information. We call it as LSU. I think link state update. Okay, that's what I remember. Link state update information, LSU packets are sent as flooding. Okay, everyone, because in the link state routing protocol, which is the OSPF is also link state routing protocol, it has the topology of the entire network, right? So because of that, it floods the information to everyone as against the RIP, where messages are exchanged only with the neighbors. Here it floods to everyone. Okay, how does it do? It does something called broadcast. You know what is a broadcast? Sent to everyone. Okay, it broadcasts the information to all the other routers in the autonomous system, not just to the neighboring routers, which is a reiteration of what I have said. Okay, and again it goes for a periodic update every 30 seconds. Okay, even if the link is not changed, it sends a periodic update every 30 seconds. Okay, we call it as periodic update. That is similar to your RIP protocol. OSPF also follows that, very similar to that. Okay, what are the major advantages or probably the advancements which are happening in OSPF? First one is security. When you talk about the RIP protocols are plain text. They don't involve any encryption algorithm or encoding methodologies are used. But whereas when you talk about the open shortest path first algorithm, it goes for security. But still, it has got two variations. One is the simple one. The other one is it uses MD5, Message Digest 5 algorithm. What happens in the case of simple? The password is used, but the password is not encrypted. Okay, it is exchanged only as the plain text. Okay, does not provide much of the security, but it gives the advantage of the not overburdening your router's processor. Okay, because when you use the MD5 algorithm, you're supposed to create the message digest once again and then mapping, comparing whether there is a change in the digest. All these difficulties are involved when you talk about the MD5, but it provides security. Second one, multiple same cost paths are possible in OSPF, which means when you are having a OSPF installed from a particular network to the remote network, if two routes are existing, both the routes are giving the same cost of the path. Okay, a path cost. Okay, cost of the path is same. In that case, both can be occupying the routing table. Now, the tie can be broken arbitrarily by the routers when it is really doing the actual forwarding of information. Okay, and the third one is support of hierarchy within a single routing domain. Within an autonomous system, you can go for hierarchy. We have got multiple versions of OSPF, single area OSPF, multi-area OSPF, and then stub area. There are some, how to configure OSPF in the stub area. You know what is a stub network, which has got only one exit to the external world. That is called stub network. And then not so stubby network. Very, very interesting things are available in OSPF. So interested readers, please explore more on that. You will really feel a new world of OSPF. Now you have got even OSPF version 3, which supports IPv6. Very, very interesting. I urge you to spend your valuable time on that as well. All right, so that brings end to my presentation, but my class is not over. I have got some RIP protocols. Hope you're able to see my packet tracer screen as well. Okay, I have already configured RIP protocol here. If I start doing it once again, it will be boring to you because you guys have done multiple exercises in your laboratory with RIP version 1 and RIP version 2. But I have noted some three um, commands which can be executed when you are running the RIP protocol. So for that, let me see whether whether RIP protocol is in action. Let me see because show run is the command. Yes. Sir, RIP is already configured. I have got RIP, router RIP, all the networks are configured. Let me also parallelly see whether the end-to-end pinging is happening. Mm, yeah, it's successful, right? So I think I have already configured it, this RIP protocol. Let us see how these commands are working. Okay, so I'm not going to go to this. I'll go to maybe this router. Okay, this router has got a fast Ethernet interface. Okay, this is a simple story. I hope you guys are listening. This is a simple story. I have got a router here. Let me say R0. Okay, this R0 is connected to two networks. One is through the fast Ethernet interface. The other one is through the serial interface. And I also have given 1.0 network on the fast Ethernet, 2.0 network on the serial interface. Now, when this router is configured with RIP, we have just seen that these routers are configured with RIP protocol. Yes, but I think I would have, yeah, it was working, but still I use show IP route. So it is also configured with RIP protocol, right? So when you have configured with RIP protocol, please understand this is going to send the RIP update through this serial link as well as through this fast Ethernet. Okay, when it is sending a fast update through the fast Ethernet, you should understand that the update message which is sent through this link goes waste because there is no one to receive that packet. But on the other hand, look at this R0 and R1. These two routers, when they are exchanging the RIP information, at least there is someone to receive the packet and process it. But if the RIP update packet is sent through this fast Ethernet, there is no one to receive here because we have got only two end systems, personal computers, which are not running RIP protocol. Now, can you stop by RIP protocol from sending any update through this interface? Yes, you can use passive interface. Let me see whether that works. I go for configure. I configure terminal. Um, Router RIP. Does it work here? Yeah. passive interface, I say passive interface 00. Okay. Though we cannot visualize what's exactly happening when I say passive interface 00, fast Ethernet 00, RIP updates will not be sent across this network. Okay. How can I see all the RIP updates? I have already given this in your class. I have to go for debug IP RIP command. So I have enabled this debug IP RIP. So what am I expecting is for every 30 seconds, I want to see some update messages exchange between these two routers. So let this happen here. We'll come back, and we also can configure the timers. Okay, this is your hello timer. This is your I think hold on timer. I don't remember it. The third one is your flash timer. We have just seen. All right. So these are the timers which are available. You can configure these timers as per your requirement. Okay. I can change the hello timer to from 30 to 10, from 30 to 40, and so on. Yes, we have started getting some updates. Um, this will happen every 30 seconds because this is the update message. It has received the V1 update from 2.2. 2.2 is here, the serial interface. That 304050 are 11 and 2 hops from them each, and so on. And it is also sending the update as a broadcast via serial. Okay, this is not sent to this way, it is sent only this way, and all right, and so on. So this is what happening for every 30 seconds. So how can I stop it? You can give no debug IP RIP. All right. So when I give no debug IP RIP, IP protocol debugging is off. All right. And then I can also use show IP RIP databases. Maybe I'll go to some other router. Show IP RIP databases. Yeah. Show IP RIP database. Right. So show IPRIF database is the command which gives you what are all the interfaces or the IPs where your RIP is configured. So this is a simple database. You also could see something called auto summary. Please remember RIP version 1 and RIP version 2 by default will go for auto summary. What is that auto summary? When you get the V1 or V2 update from the other router, it will update the mask into the classful boundary of the network. For instance, if it is 190 to 168, it will make the mask as 24. If it is 172.16, it will make the mask as 16. Okay, it will summarize it to the classful boundary. Okay, so that is helpful in many occasions. But when you go for your routing protocol, especially when you have the discontiguous network, your auto summary will be a big headache to you. So you can always avoid this auto summary by giving no auto summary in your RIP. Okay, so this is what I wanted to talk about RIP. I also had do you want to save the network? No, I don't want to do anything now. I also prepared some OSPF for you. Let me see whether that gets open. And I also use this. Okay. Now, these are some of the commands which can be used for OSPF, but we can see before that whether OSPF is running here. I remember configuring this. Show running configuration will give me whether OSPF is running. Yeah, it's here. So OSPF is running here. All right. So you know how to configure OSPF by giving router OSPF and the process ID, the network address. Um, um, Instead of default gateway, you'll go for the wildcard. I'm sorry. Instead of subnet mask, you'll go for wildcard mask. Then area and the area ID. Okay. So when you have multi-area OSPF, your area ID differs. Otherwise, you can go for the single area OSPF with ID 0. All right, so I have configured the OSPF. Let me check whether the end-to-end configuration is there. That is also functioning. So show IP route is the command which we normally know. But there is another command which says show IP route OSPF. Let's see whether this packet tracer version supports. Yeah, it gives show IP route OSPF. Interesting command. It will help you to quickly troubleshoot your protocol whether OSPF routing or LAN. If I simply say show IP route, it will fetch the whole of the routing table as you could see on the screen. But when I give show IP route OSPF, it fetches me only the OSPF routes which are land. Then show IP OSPF. Okay, show IP OSPF will give you some configurations here. Show IP OSPF. Yeah, it talks about what are all the exchange which are happening. Okay, routing process is OSPF1 with ID. In ID, when you talk about OSPF, the router's ID is chosen for a single autonomous system. He is responsible for exchanging and managing the OSPF network. Okay, normally the router with the biggest ID. You can see the ID is 192.168.4.1. Okay, it takes 4.1 as the biggest ID as the router ID. If you go to any OSPF process, it will give you the same thing. It supports link state advertisements. All right, so multiple more, but this all will help us to know only if we have learnt about OSPF in detail. What are the other commands? Show IP OSPF neighbor. Okay, show IP OSPF detail. Let me see. Show IP OSPF neighbor is here. Whether it supports. Yeah, neighbor. Okay, it gives you the neighbor. So for the particular router, what are all the ID of the routers? Okay, ID would be different from address. Please remember it, sir. ID, for example, which router I have chosen? Okay, I have chosen this router. Okay, this router gives me two neighbors. One is 2.1, the other one is 5.2.254. Okay, neighbor ID is 5.254, but address is 4.2. What is this, sir? Confusion? Please remember, the biggest IP address which is configured in that router will be taken as the ID of the router, which is called as router ID. Remember this two: 5.254, 4.2. Go to this 5.254 and 4.2. Okay, you could see for both the IP address here, where 5.254 is the biggest one, that is considered as the ID for this router. Okay, so that's why you have got. And similarly, this router has got 1.254 and 2.1. 2.1 is bigger in number, so 2.1 is taken as the neighbor ID. So this is how you can see whether you have your neighbors have chosen the correct neighbor ID, or there is any mistake, or should we go for a backup router for it, or if the particular router fails, which will become the neighbor ID. If the particular interface fails, which will become the neighbor ID. So these are all some interesting phenomena which are happening in OSPF. Please explore more on that, and if time permits, I will try at a later time to give you one or two lectures or videos on OSPF in detail. All right, so this is what I have for you today. And I stop sharing. Probably I will stop recording as well.